South Africa is currently hosting the annual African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA, in Johannesburg. It's a forum to discuss the United States' flagship trade program for the continent. AGOA was signed into law by former United States President Bill Clinton in May 2000. The intention was to improve trade and investment ties with sub-Saharan Africa on the basis that the best way to raise living standards on the continent and create jobs was through trade, not aid. At the start of the conference, U.S. President Joe Biden revealed plans to expel Uganda, Gabon, Niger, and the Central African Republic. So we wondered, why were they expelled, and how have the countries that have been part of the African Growth and Opportunities Act benefited from their involvement? I've been speaking to the Ghanaian financial analyst Richmond Frimpong.
AGOA is literally the African Growth and Opportunity Act. It's a trade program that is meant to support countries in Africa that are located south of the Sahara. So sub-Saharan Africa, any country that falls within that category, all the way from Mali, Burkina down to Lesotho and Co. Any of these countries is able to access the U.S. markets with their products, literally, so they can improve and increase their exports. And usually it's in a basket of about 6,000 products. And so if you're a country in sub-Saharan Africa and you want to take advantage of exporting into the U.S. market at zero cost, that you don't have to face any charges in terms of tax, then that country qualifies to take advantage of the AGOA Act.
So what do those African countries have to do in order to qualify? What's the criteria?
There are a number of things, but critical among them is some particular things the American government looks out for to see African countries practice, and is democratic credence, where an African country is committed to being democratic and also, most importantly, paying attention to human rights. So anything that has implications of the laws that go against any of these things in any country south of the Sahara, you will not be given the chance to take advantage of that market.
Now, in terms then of our assessments and assessments by various organizations like Amnesty International and so on, lots and lots of African countries don't qualify in terms of those criteria. We know that Uganda, Gabon, Niger, and the Central African Republic have most recently been expelled from this agreement. Are these all other African countries part of the deal, or are they not part of the deal because of their human rights record?
There are a number of them that are not, but usually the American government engages these countries and points out some of the things they feel they should correct and give them time to change, or give them time to improve, or even give them time for their systems to kick in to correct these outliers they find. For example, if you pick the case of Uganda, prior to this announcement, you will hear on a number of occasions from last year when the U.S. government started hinting that we have noticed that you are taking a certain trend on homosexuality, and we think you should pay attention to how you are probably tabling your laws. So it is not just outright. Usually, most of the countries miss out on one or two things that may disqualify them. And sometimes when they even say you are banned or you are sanctioned from leveraging or taking advantage of the Growth Act, they sometimes just suspend you for a period, and they check if within that period of suspension you are going to do anything different. And if you do, they come back to you.
Let's look at Rwanda. The US and Rwanda fell out over second-hand clothes in 2018 rather than Rwanda's human rights record. So is there a lack of consistency in this regard?
For every country, there is something specific they will put you on, for example, to correct. So it is not just about human rights. It could be trade. For example, they could say that this type of trade you are doing, this type of quality testing you are bringing into a market, we think you should correct it. This kind of product that is qualifying into the 6,000, you should correct it. But the point is, when it is not in the category of democratic and human rights, the sanctioning is a big target. And so that is why you see that for some countries that have experienced coup d'etat lately, it's almost like the opportunity for them to be given some length of time to correct. It's not happening for them because those cases are quite significant in terms of the impact on the lives of the people in those countries.
Our listeners are very cynical and skeptical, I should say, of overtures from countries like the US. They believe that there's a double standard that applies. Very often, human rights abuses are overlooked in those countries, and if they're beneficial to the United States, is human rights a red line, or is it a pliable measure to employ?
Well, from where I sit, I think it is a red line, but it's in degrees. So look at the example of Uganda. The case of human rights violation includes punishment, for example, for people who practice homosexuality to the extent of being punished by death or so.
Yeah, that's a law that was introduced in Uganda recently.
Yes.
That was what led to Uganda being chucked out now.
Yes. Now, when you go to Rwanda in this same conversation, yes, you may say there are pockets of human rights violations, but do you pick the same consequence in terms of the punishment to this extreme? Maybe no. And so when the US is dealing with them, they check two things. They check what they got to lose if they close out on this market, and they check the extreme in terms of that particular country and how it's going to affect them.
Do African countries actually benefit from this relationship? What are the benefits? I know we're talking about markets, we're talking about trade, but how effectively does it actually work?
African economies can survive only if they are able to take advantage of manufacturing through industrialization. Now, if that premise is true, then you need markets that will be able to take your exports. And one of the greatest markets that can take a good chunk of exports is the American market. If you take advantage of AGOA, then you can export so much either by your own nationals doing manufacturing or investors that come in. When that happens, three things minimum can happen to your economy. Number one, you can get a lot of job creation that cures unemployment. Unemployment is very huge, particularly among the youth on the continent. Number two, there is job, skill, and technology transfer so that the economies can sustain themselves when these industrial plants are no more for whatever reason they may be. The third thing is that it is able to also bring up the economy to a level where they become developed and income levels increase and poverty levels reduces. Basically, that is the struggle of almost every African nation. Countries who take advantage of AGOA really are able to transform the economies.
So all the countries that have been suspended, do they care at all?
That is a good question. For many, well, there's national pride. There is a number of things that the countries would trade for this if it means this is what we believe in as a nation. And if that is the price we have to pay for many, the ideologies that, well, then we don't really care, even though it has consequences. Countries who say they do not care probably have another way or an alternative plan to get the advantages they are going to miss if they are suspended from AGOA.
Interestingly, South Africa is hosting the summit this week, but South Africa has been, shall we say, involved in a more complicated relationship with the US in recent months, or rather the West as well. Besides its long-standing founding status as a member of BRICS, conversations that have been going on around South Africa's relationship with Russia vis-a-vis the war in Ukraine.
Yes, it is. But if you look at it carefully, I think it's quite strategic because AGOA is a game changer on the continent. And as long as America is using it as a tool, countries that are not complying with what they feel should be taken serious, then South Africa knows that it probably may not be today, but it could one day get to them if that tool is applied. South Africa is in a place where they want to open up this difficult conversation and see if it could be a trump card for them to win other people to think differently outside of creating other avenues on trade beyond America.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye. That's the financial analyst, Richmond Frimpong.